My name is Lindsay Clandfield, and we are both teachers and teacher trainers and writers. And we're here today to talk about a project that in fact we started around 10 years ago. It was a book that we wrote called The Language Teacher's Survival Guide. Recently this book has been taken up by What's Up English, who are our sponsors today, so we'd like to thank them and Macmillan for making it possible for us to come out here and talk about this. The Survival Guide is a little booklet which has been made into a series of articles. And basically, we wanted to address certain things. Duncan?
Yeah, I mean, working as teacher trainers, we kind of realized that, especially at the beginning of the career, we were kind of helping people on training courses, but there were things that happened to them afterwards that we hadn't really prepared to survive the ELT. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the kind of things that happen in the staff room and other areas of teaching.
One of our starting points was we did a very small research project to try to find out what teachers carried with them in their bags. It was a very interesting thing, and actually we've redone this several times over the past 10 years. You can imagine how things may have changed. Incidentally, in this project, in this presentation, we'll be only addressing some of the issues of survival, or what we can talk about in 25 minutes. But the first thing, we thought that surviving meant being resourceful. And one of our starting points and questions was, what do teachers always have with them in their bags? What do they, apart from their course book or teacher's book, what else did teachers always carry in their bags? So to start off our session, I'd like you to quickly tell each other what you always have in your bag, in your teaching bag when you go to teaching. What do you always have? Mini research. I want you to see how many of these you had on your list. Okay.
Now, we've got some stationery there. Yep. Of course. Make sure you put your name on it, but people always nick it. Every teacher needs those cards. Just put the vocab on them and make an activity out of it. Put a diary, in case images aren't clear at the back. We've got music. Yeah, on your memory stick. Songs you can play as background music, or maybe stuff you do with your students, working on the lyrics. In the middle we've got photos, family photos, or photos that we find interesting. Of course, these can be stored on your memory stick. When we actually first did this, then you have copies of something. That's how old. That's how old kind of is. Dice. You might be surprised, but no, those games in the IATEFL books need dice. Sometimes you just need dice to decide things, who's going to work together or what activities you're going to do. A dictionary, why not? The students still bring them to class, small ones, of course online ones, will do as well. And another book, some people prefer the electronic form, but some people still use the...
We found out many teachers still carry a regular notebook to write like real notes and pen. How many of you use a regular, real notebook? Okay, so you're still doing that. Not everyone has moved on to the iPad notes or things like that.
One I missed was the jar of sweets or mints. I suppose the sweets give us prizes to the students, while the mints are to sort out your breath. We've missed anything important that you came up with in the bag. Blue tag.
Blue tag. That will be with the stationery, I think. The whole stationery kids.
What?
Water.
Mobile. Phone.
Of course, the phone
We
will have
check your
one.
mates while the students are doing
No.
credit cards. You might want to go shopping during the lesson.
Well, sorry, one more thing.
And I was in case I finish early, I always have something to give my students to do.
Excellent.
No.
Don't beg the question what size the bag is, that's it.
One of the things, when we say being resourceful, it also meant that if you didn't have a lot of things in your bag, how would you be most resourceful with some of the things that you did have in your bag? And we asked teachers, beginning teachers and experienced teachers, for example, how many uses could they think of one of these items? For example, the deck of cards. Lots of teachers begin to become more and more resourceful with less and less things as they continue developing, I think. They start seeing different uses for things. And the deck of cards was one interesting experiment. How many different uses could you see for a deck of cards? Okay, let's go for 30 seconds. Can you think of 3 uses? That's 1 use per 10 seconds. And a deck of cards. Okay, that's more than 30 seconds. Here were some of the things that teachers came up with. Obviously was a one-off lesson on teaching card playing vocabulary. Other teachers had it always to do a card trick to calm them down. People use them to teach numbers. You can use these as sort of number teaching thing. The one that I like the best is I read a whole article about using a deck of cards for classroom management. So putting students into groups, you randomly distribute out and say, the hearts get together, the threes get together, the clubs get together, and so on. Really nice idea. Cards representing food. I witnessed a class where the teacher did the restaurant role play thing, but he was the short order cook, and they had to take the order and pretend it was on the card and leave the order, and then he would distribute the orders. So the card became that. Prepositions, play happy families, and for the business teachers, you play a game of solitaire while you're waiting. And hoping that your student doesn't show up and you still get paid. Okay. So being resourceful was one thing that we noticed that we thought, that was the kinds of stuff that we wanted to be doing with new teachers. Getting them to become resourceful with less things. But surviving very quickly meant sharing and supporting each other. A few years ago, I was at an IATEFL doing talks at different conferences on teacher burnout. And one of the facts that always stuck with me from reading about teacher burnout was that it occurred in the first 2 years of teaching, in the majority of cases. It's not necessarily the case that old 20-year experienced teachers all burn out. It's more common that it's the very young teachers. After 2 years, they stop and they go to another profession. And part of that was they're not getting support or sharing. One of the activities that, if we had more time, that Duncan and I have done, is to get teachers to draw a sketch of their staff room. Because that's where a lot of the sharing and supporting might go on if you're in a school environment. And from that, we would extrapolate different kinds of staff rooms. We don't have time to do that here, but looking at staff rooms is an area where teachers can work on survival. There were different kinds of staff rooms that emerged. I'll let Duncan mention about some of them.
This is the kind of ideal one. You can see from the picture. It's called our community place. This is the staff room that I think everyone wants to work in, yeah? Where you go in and sharing stories about their classes, but not moaning about students, positive stories. They're sharing materials, there's a sharing lesson board. There's even a kind of social conversation going on between all sorts of staff, experienced ones, less experienced ones. Everybody feels part of it. People are even doing the Guardian crossword together as a kind of team building activity. Does anyone work in that staff room? How many people work in the staff room I described?
Yes.
A few, okay. Right.
The second kind of staff room that would often emerge, and I've worked in a staff room like this, is the one where there are very defined barriers. Either, and this was the kind of sign that might be on it. First of all, it might be teachers only, no students, no way can the student cross those room, not even to ask the teacher a question or anything. Anyone being in the staff room where it almost says, no students allowed, or anything like that, yeah? But the keep out sign could also refer to cliques within a school or within a staff. So you may have only 2 computers, and they tend to be always used by the same teachers. because they have their material and they don't want to share it. That was my case at a staff room in Mexico. Or there's only one nice desk and everything else is kind of not so nice desks. And the nice desk belongs to the senior teacher and no one can touch the stationery or anything that's on there. So that would be the second kind of staff room. Anyone have a staff room like that? Some tentative hands. You're looking around to see if your bosses are here. Okay.
It gets worse, though, unfortunately. There is this staff room, and I think teachers in their first 2 years could literally be electrocuted in them. I don't know if anyone's got that experience. I mean, Lindsay alluded it to it a bit there. But certainly, going in and all the conversations are toxic. Yeah? The teachers are complaining about the school and about the management, or they're complaining about the students, or they're complaining about not being paid. They're not sharing materials. They're kind of barging each other out of the way. They're huffing and puffing, or sitting there in silence with a cloud over their head. Yeah. Now, no one's put up their hands so far. Lindsay, the other two. How many people identify with that? We've hit the depths of hell and still people are putting their hands up.
There are other places where there is literally no staff room. But one of our advice that we would give to teachers, especially if you've had a few years experience in a staff room, is that it is an area where you can take initiative to make changes. We made a whole bunch of recommendations, just from simple things like making it look nice or bringing in a plant, sharing things, creating that kind of community place. One warning is if you have a shared staff room and kitchen area, that ends up becoming sometimes a bit like this if people are messy and they don't clean their tea mugs. But there are steps that people can do, and it's one concrete place to start to help each other survive, is make an agreeable, nice staff room environment.
Yeah, so you're getting the idea that people coming off cert courses and into the profession have a good understanding of grammar and organising pair work and classroom management, but things are happening to them as they start their career, which aren't really things that they've dealt with on their course, and are actually probably the things that are going to influence whether they leave the profession or not, rather than whether they can present the perfect things. Another area for this is
surviving is meaning being self-aware. Now, what we want to talk about here is a aspect,
Teacher body language. And actually, we were just saying to each other, we're really actually very conscious of our body language right now. There's a wonderful book that I recommend called Effective Body Language for Teachers. I don't know if it's still in print. Effective, and I can't remember the author, but Effective Body Language for Teachers. And it explores the kinds of things that confident teachers do and the kind of things that teachers who lack confidence do. And if any of you have been teacher trainers and have been able to observe teachers, there are certain things that confident teachers do and that unconfident teachers do. We're going to illustrate these. Duncan will be acting out the things as I...
The first thing that we wanted to talk about was eye contact. We always, when we are training teachers, we always tell them to try to make eye contact with the students. Often we would see nervous teachers doing things like writing on the board and talking to the students.
Yeah, so what did you put for number 5 then?
Or doing things like looking through the book, the answers to teacher's book while talking to students.
Yeah, so Nikki, number 3.
This kind of gave the message that the students weren't sure where they were being addressed. They didn't know who the teacher was addressing, and so on and so forth. So what we always would tell teachers, make eye contact, link eye contact, meet eye contact with the people around the room. But you can't go too far with this. Look at what happens with a sustained eye contact at one person. According to the book we read, sustained eye contact in one-to-one interactions can indicate one of two things. Both are strong emotions. It either indicates love, or it indicates that I want to pick a fight with you. Now, what we found is new teachers, and I have to confess, hands up, I thought this as well, they misinterpret the group all staring at you for a strong emotion. So that's sort of like, they all were staring at me, they love me, or they all stared at me because they hate me. So it's interpreting that and also being careful not to have a sustained eye contact with one person for a long time. It can be misinterpreted across cultures. What do nervous teachers do? Nervous teachers often did things like holding on to things. Normally holding on to yourself. Just holding on to yourself. This is called, anthropologists call this a body clutch. This is the clutch. And also holding on to a book was another one. Standing in front of the class with the teacher's book as sort of the shield. So that was one that we were trying to tell the students to avoid. Another kind of nervous body language thing was fiddling. Fiddling with bits of your clothes. Fiddling with your ear or your nose. Hair. Fiddling with your glasses, taking them on, taking them off, taking them on, taking them off, and putting things in your mouth. Putting things in your mouth is now, obviously, we didn't see teachers put books in their mouths, but I did see a teacher once take a student's pen, be talking, and then put it in their mouth. And then, because they were so nervous, they tended to chew pens. So, an anthropologist call this fiddling and touching yourself, they call it grooming, and it's a sign of nervousness and submission. When monkeys start doing that to not be noticed by the aggressive one. So what do confident teachers tend to do, according to the book that we read? Well, standing or leaning slightly. Okay, not leaning too much, though. Leaning slightly gave a sense, it shows I'm relaxed, I'm cool. Then you may have known the ultra cool teacher with the body language who didn't sit on a chair, but who sat on the edge of a table. Did you ever? That body gesture, yes, that was the body language of me, I'm so cool, I'm almost the age of my students. Okay? The other thing is that what we would sometimes tell teachers to do if we saw they were fiddling too much, and the way that you know if you're fiddling too much, if you're doing one of those things, is ask students, or if you see students imitating you. If you see students imitating you, they picked up the tick that you have. So if we saw a teacher always kind of pulling their nose, doing this, sucking on their glasses, things like that, we'd say, listen, put your hands in your pockets while you're talking in the meanwhile. However, be very careful of this and what you're doing with your hands, especially the gentleman teachers. So, being self-aware with body language, one of the best things that we found for teachers was filming them, filming yourself, and watching your body language, filming yourself, and then analyzing that with a colleague. You will definitely see the tics that you've got, you'll see if you're pacing around too much, and these are things you can work on. Okay. Right. Yes.
Yeah, activities. That's the other thing people do to survive, isn't it? Teachers love to have a few activities that are going to be fun for the students, useful as well, and they have them up their sleeve. We've got some examples of when we did a bit of a survey. I think the top 4, wasn't it?
Top 4.
Probably, or top 5.
Yeah.
You probably know that sessions is that activity where you say to the student, here's a word or a phrase, you're going to have a mingled conversation, you've got to get your word or phrase into the conversation. So you say dog biscuits, and they have to talk about football with someone and then insert the phrase dog biscuits. Have you ever done that with your students? You love it. Back to the board is a class that the students still ask for in end of course feedback on questionnaires. They say, can we play back to the board? Very simple vocab revision game now where one of the students has their back to the board and the other students describe one of the words from the lesson or a phrase and they have to guess what it is. Yeah?
This one is less, but we did find this with more teachers and young learners. Things like backwriting. Backwriting was they had to spell a word from the lesson on their partner's back, or air writing. They spell it in the air and so on. The reason we chose these activities, they were consistently the activities that came up again and again, and that new teachers sort of gravitated towards to fill the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 15 or 20 minutes if they'd run out of material. The other one was categories. They have different names in different countries. I've heard these. This is the one where you write the letter S or W on the board, and they have to get a noun, an animal, a city, and so on. Do you know that one? Yeah. Yes, or it's got different names. And another one, which we'll be doing in a moment, is using quotes and finishing quotes. We're coming. We're doing okay for time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got 10 minutes yet? Is that right?
Yeah. Surviving also means, and again, we're coming back to the whole issue of burnout and so on, is that teachers often come into the profession
new teachers especially, come into the profession with very great expectations. We personally have had a lot of experience training people who've left other professions, even sort of much better paid professions, banking, insurance, and so on, saying they want to give something back, and they want to be a language teacher and give something back, or they want to change, they're just sick of the corporate environment. But even with younger teachers who haven't had other jobs before, there's often that idea that I want to give something to the world, I want to inspire. It's all over the popular culture, especially in Hollywood movies, of the inspiring teacher who changed the life of students. But very shortly, teachers realize that the reality is anything but that. It's very far away from that. The pay isn't that great. They don't get enough gratitude from their students. They're squeezed by all the different shareholders. And it's easy to lose faith. So often we like to, getting a sharing community in a staff room is part of restoring faith. Coming to an event like IATEFL restores your faith in yourself as a teacher and in the profession. Doing and leading your own workshops is another way. We're going to finish with one of our favorite activities, to finish the quote one, which is all about teachers. And we're going to ask you to participate in doing it, okay? Is that okay?
Yes.
You know, I don't know why I asked that, because even if it isn't okay, it doesn't matter. It's what you're going to get. So, okay.
All right, let's, can you, with a partner, try to finish each of these quotes in your own words, okay? A poor surgeon hurts one person at a time, a poor teacher. Teachers are people who, and teaching is the profession that. Okay, so please finish each of those quotes in your own words.
Can you see those at the back? At the back, can you see the quotes? Yeah?
Hurts themselves. You're all very good. I did this once in a workshop when a teacher put up their hand. First teacher said, a poor teacher has no money. Okay, good. A poor teacher, the end quote that was hurts 30. Okay. So again, with students, we use other quotes that relate to the topic of the class and accept any answer as long as it's grammatically correct and makes sense.
Teachers are people who what?
Impart knowledge.
Who what? Impart knowledge.
Inspire.
Mold the world. Oh, move the world. Ah, you said rock the world. Right, yes. Who can change your life. Who emphasizes that. Who change lives. That's nice, isn't it? Like taking occasional risks. I'm echoing it. Is that because I'm just doing that out of habit, or can you hear it back? Is that helpful if we echo what they said? You should have sat near in the front, you know that.
This is a very
Save
cynical.
everyone a lot of trouble if you just come and sat down in the front. What is your problem?
This is a cynical one, I'm afraid, so it's not going to make you feel good. Okay, but I thought we would finish with a nice, motivating one. This has got a nice ending, but let's hear what you thought. Teaching is a profession that?
What?
Oh, now you don't want to say anything, so?
Brings no money.
Makes no money. Is rewarding. This one, I think this one should be written above the doors of every staff room to make teachers feel better. Teaching is a profession that creates all the others. Isn't that wonderful? Without teaching, teachers, there's nothing else. There's no other professions.
You're welcome. That wasn't politically correct.
Okay, it's a very short presentation. As we said, we couldn't cover all of the things that we wanted to talk about. This was originally a little booklet, which is now a series of articles available on One Stop English. It's for new teachers mostly, but also experienced teachers or teacher trainers and things like that. We wanted to share some of the things that we've learned from this journey of the 10 years that we've been working on different versions of this book. We wanted to thank you also for coming and thank Macmillan again, not just for bringing us out here, but for buying us matching outfits. We just realized that we were wearing exactly the same clothes. And maybe it's a new Macmillan thing, we have to do that. We are going to finish with one thing. Do you want to read it out at the mic?
Yeah, the thing with the talk is surviving ELT, but I came across an email that's clearing out, as you do sometimes, your emails, and I was about to press delete, but the title of the email was Surviving the IATEFL Conference. And I thought, hang on, don't delete, let's see what this is. Turns out it's from a mate of mine who wrote me this email 10 years ago. I never saw it at the time, it was just before I came to my first conference, but I thought we might share some of it with you, because the advice is absolutely stunning, and we're still in the early days of the conference, so you guys have got a chance to benefit from what I did, and I had to learn all this the hard way, and Lindsay will help with the miming as I did before, so I think some of this needs illustrating. Yes, hi Duncan, sorry I can't be here this year. Here's some advice for you. First of all, he says, escaping early from a talk you don't like. The IATEFL program includes an amazing variety of fascinating talks and workshops for you to choose from. However, you're bound to make bad choices and go to crap ones. But don't worry. Don't worry, you just need a backup plan. Here is what you should do. First of all, when you arrive at talk, always sit near the back. Now we know what's going on. That's it. For the purpose of this, we'll pretend this is the back, okay? Because we will. Right. When you realise the talk is going to be crap, take your IATEFL program and consult it earnestly. Shrug and shake your head. Do this with some degree of theatre. Come on, Lindsay. And attract the attention of people sitting nearby, and then mutter, wrong room, wrong room, in a stage whisper. They and the speaker will understand that you have simply gone to the wrong room. They will look for a minute and suspect that you think the talk is crap. And at this point, you stand up and leave. Preferably with a glance at your watch and muttering the imaginary number of the imaginary room. The imaginary talk you are now going to. This is absolutely brilliant. I wish I'd known this. Actually, he goes on though. Arriving later to talk. Now that's a good one, isn't it? That happens a lot. Yeah, okay, what does he say? There's very specific protocol for arriving later to talk, which I will explain. As you certainly don't want to make a fool of yourself, do you, Lindsay?
No.
Oh, nobody does. You probably think the most sensible thing to do would be just to sit down quietly at the back, but you would be wrong, my friend. First off, the back seats are all taken by delegates pursuing the quick getaway strategy that I mentioned before. He's got a point there, and it's true. Look how full it is. There's no room, so you arrive late. Yeah, I'm willing with this one. The only empty seats will be at the front or in the middle. Okay, we found one. According to conference protocol, having spotted a vacant seat, yes, spotted one? Okay. Having spotted the vacant seat, you must make your way in a stage tiptoe. Taking huge pausing strides. Sorry. Like a pantomime villain. Say sorry over and over again in a loud stage whisper. Make as much eye contact as possible with both the speaker and all the members of the audience. I think you missed one
ones to back. When, and only when you are finally satisfied that you have captured the attention of everyone in the room and completely derailed the talk, then, and only then, should you sit down. There's more, but I mean, it's absolute. We've had to sort of survive 8 years without that advice. I wish I'd known before. Hopefully you guys can benefit from that, especially if you're new to the conference. Anyway, he ends, hope this helps, have a great conference. Bill, what would you like to say?
I think there was a PS as well that he said,
Ah, yes.
all costs.
Oh yeah, there's something about the Macmillan party here, isn't there? Yes. Where is it? Yeah. Yes. Whatever you do. Oh yeah, whatever you do, if you go to the party, make sure you've got plenty of aspirins to take in the morning because you're bound to have a hangover. The Macmillan party.
That brings us to an end of our talk. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming.